The NFL draft has become a phenomena in professional sports and the American sports landscape like almost nothing else. And we will see the latest on Thursday night in Detroit. We've got Quentin Crisco on the line. You can catch him on Budkiss Stats. It's right here on YouTube, and we will find out a lot more about what that's all about here in the next few minutes. But we're taking your comments and questions on the NFL draft, of course, Thursday through Saturday this year in Detroit. Quentin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. We had Quentin on our Texas show a couple Mondays ago and heard his rundown on the Longhorns' many prospects on both sides of the ball. So before we get into it here, Budkiss Stats. So you went old school on this.
Yeah, that's my dog is actually named Buckus, and like I've just always loved all the lore stories about Dick Buckus and the way he played the position, and the little bit of video that you can find out there of him playing has just always been like I loved it. So Dick Buckus, from the jersey behind me, you can always tell has always been my guy.
Folks, again, we're taking your comments and questions. Quentin knows what he's talking about concerning the NFL draft. So get your draft questions into us and your comments. And so when somebody checks out Budkiss Stats on YouTube, what are they going to find there?
So lately, a lot of draft profiles. Like I think I've put up about 20 to 30 just 2 to 3 minute videos of me on the mic talking through a prospect and just reels of tape going behind it, that trying to match up the audio with the video to some degree, of saying, these are some strengths, these are some weaknesses. So I've got about 20, 25 maybe prospects up there. And then besides that, I really like the trenches. I'm a big offensive line person, big defensive line person. So like I did a video during the season last year about a game that Jalen Carter had, a video about a game from Dexter Lawrence. I did some Chicago Bears offensive line breakdowns. I try to hit all NFL though. So go check it out if you're an NFL fan, because I'm trying to really diversify it to offensive line, defensive line across the whole league.
All right, Quentin. So since you major on the trench play, I'm going to ask you about Caleb Williams to start.
Yeah.
so,
I've watched plenty of tape on him too.
So yeah, this is a guy in college who was almost like Superman. He could dodge anyone in the backfield. Obviously, he made his offensive linemen track him all over the field as he was circling back and forth and would extend plays. Usually try to stay behind the line of scrimmage and beat a defense with his arm. But if he had to take off, he had to take off, and was difficult to deal with in the open field. And uh, the arm talent and the ability to throw from different angles and all that is obvious, and the physical capabilities. What is your evaluation of Caleb Williams? Is it as strong as what everyone else thinks?
Yeah, it's right up there with just about any of the strong takes you're getting. I mean, obviously, you're still talking about a rookie quarterback. You're talking about a kid coming in the NFL who's going to have to elevate his play to another level when he gets there. And that's always a question with these guys, is how can they elevate their play? How much better can they get? Now, one thing that I do kind of a statement I kind of had earlier this year about Caleb Williams was not that he was bored, because obviously he was running for his life a lot of times. He didn't have the best roster around him, but it felt like he kind of hit a ceiling as far as he can go, as far as dominating on a college level, where I think he needs the NFL level of competition to keep growing, to keep becoming better. And I think that's something that we're hopefully see. I mean, I'm a Bears fan. Hopefully the Bears do see that at number one overall and see him continue to grow at the next level, because I do think there is room for him to still grow, but that arm talent is ridiculous. And he is such a rare football player for his understanding of space and speed, his understanding of how to alter his speed in moments. Like Patrick Mahomes has this, Aaron Rodgers has it too, of like they keep a little bit of gas in the tank. They're not showing you all their speed all the time. They're varying it just right to get the right angles, to get the right amount of space between you and them, that they say, okay, now I can go over here instead. So from a running standpoint, I think that's really special. And from a pocket management standpoint, It's really impressive. You don't see, I don't think you see kids like this at quarterback in college often who understand the space of a pocket and how to manipulate it the way that Caleb Williams does.
So we've got a lot of Michigan fans here, Quentin, and of course they want to know about JJ McCarthy. And this guy is soaring up a lot of people's boards. I don't know what the disparity is in the various analysts, but here's a guy that has obviously raised his stock throughout the off season. Do you see it as much as some people do?
I probably see it a little less than some of the people out there, but I do see it. It's tough with a guy like JJ because you're talking about a guy who didn't throw all that often. So it's really hard to find the tape to evaluate and to assess it accurately once you find it, right? Because there's so many games where they're just leaning on the run game, they're leaning on their offensive line to do the work, and they're not asking him to do a ton. But in some of those moments where you see him having to step up and make throws, the arm talent's right there with anybody. That much you can tell pretty quickly once you find those moments. He can throw that thing on a rope, cross hash, cross his body. He has the arm talent to be just about whatever he needs to be at the next level. One of the things that I think he'll need to grow with though is a lot of times you hear about quarterbacks talked about similar to like a golf bag, right? What clubs do they have in their bag? Can they hit those clubs? Right now, JJ only has a few clubs in his bag as far as the throws that he's making. That doesn't mean he won't develop those throws, but it means he needs a coach needs to get with him and take the time to develop those throws, to get more touch on the football, to layer it over a lurking cornerback, but not overthrowing to where he's hitting the safety over the top and say a Tampa 2 down the sideline. Like there is stuff that he still needs to figure out, but when you see that arm talent with, some sneaky athleticism and a guy who could operate a pro style offense and was asked to fully operate a pro style offense, can get under center, can play shotgun. There's a lot of small things that you do really like within his profile there.
So, Quentin, we could be here all night going through every player on the board. I don't want to limit you at the quarterback position, but we could go through all sorts of guys. Jaden Daniels would be the next obvious choice. But is there a guy down the board that intrigues you as a possible steal?
So, to me, and this has been one of the most like outside of the quarterback position. Or are you asking quarterback position?
Well, we can go in any direction. I was thinking quarterback, but if you want to go somewhere else, that's fine.
So I know at quarterback, some people do like the kid out of Tulane. I haven't gotten the chance to actually watch a lot of him yet. Being from the Bears standpoint, I watched Caleb, I watched the other big guys, but I kind of knew they were going quarterback first round, so I moved past the big guys after that. But I look at
Pratt.
Yeah, Michael Pratt. That's him. I think that from what I've heard, there's some nice stuff within his system, his ability to play on time accurately. There's some stuff to like there, but I do wonder if there is some arm limitations there based on what I've heard. I can't speak to what I've actually watched on him because I didn't get my hands on the tape. Now, on the D line for a guy who I think could be a steal, like towards the end of the first round, and this one is subjective because the reason he's going to be there in the late first round is medical questions. He had a Jones fracture in his foot, and we're talking D line. We're talking a 300-pound guy, and Jerzon Newton out of Illinois, Johnny Newton. There's questions about how extra pressure, any pressure from a 300-pounder, you're putting more pressure on your feet than any other player on the field, any other position on the field, I guess I should say. And the Jones fracture might not fully heal there and might just be a constant issue. You worry about the feet of those big guys. Like I think Johnny Newton is a top 10 talent in this class. I think his hands, his quickness off the football, and just the way that he has grown over the last 2 years at Illinois from a pass rush perspective of using his hands, being able to stack pass rush moves on top of each other, being able to read the block in front of him and adjust his plan to what it takes to beat that block is so impressive. If I'm an NFL scout looking at him, I'm going, I can teach this kid anything. He has learned so much already so quickly. You feel really good about his ability to progress at the NFL level just as long as that foot holds up. I think he could be a steal down the board if that foot holds up.
Yeah, this is where NFL evaluators are so far ahead of the people that watch college football just because Johnny Newton, he plays for Illinois. So People aren't watching him.
Right.
Now, I will say that it's funny you bring him up because as soon as that name came out of your mouth, I thought, now he is one of a handful of players over the last couple of years that I generally watch the game. I've watched tons of football in my lifetime, more than I would like to admit, or that is healthy. But still, I generally watch the game as a fan. So I'm watching the ball, unless there's a reason for me to watch otherwise. And so a defensive player has to be extraordinary to jump off the screen. And he is one of those guys in the last couple of years in college football that when I watched Illinois, when I didn't know who he was, I found out who he was, not from reading. I found out from who is that guy? He is a mountain. He's moving people into the
Yeah.
backfield. He's blowing plays up.
That's the best guy you can be on the football field. The who is that guy, because it means you got noticed, right? That's the dream for every football player.
Absolutely. We've got Quentin Crisco here from Budkiss Stats. It's right here on YouTube. So it's a click on over. As soon as we get done here, you can click on over, check out what Quentin has available for the NFL draft. And of course, tons of profiles, as he just mentioned. What particular teams are in a position, do you think, at this point? Of course, the draft board is going to change with trades and so forth. But as it stands right now, what teams are in a position to help themselves the most?
I mean, from a bias perspective, the Bears with 2 top 10 picks, it's hard not to say that they're in a position to help themselves a lot. But the Cardinals, every time I do a mock draft and I start to think, well, maybe the Cardinals might trade down from 4. It's like next thing I know, they have 5 picks in the top 50. The Cardinals have so much draft capital right now, so much ability to jump around throughout the draft. Like we could be sitting here by the end of next season saying the Cardinals are starting to look like a real contender because of their draft last year and this year, because they can just add so much talent. And if you remember last year, they traded back and added a bunch of picks. They had a massive draft class. They nailed a handful of those guys, I think. And Monty Austinford is doing some good stuff in Arizona right now from the GM perspective that I think they're really setting themselves up nicely.
So basically, what you just outlined is one of the things I do on a fairly regular basis, evaluating recruiting classes in college to say, okay, I've got my evaluation, I've got my perspective, but those guys are the experts. And even though I disagree with the selection or I disagree with this, if somebody's got a track record and they've proven themselves at some point, especially a fan base has to say, we watched it for 2 decades in New England where you just throw up your hands and say, even though that doesn't make any sense to me, you just have to trust. Who are you outlined what's going on there in those 2 locations? Anybody else around the league that maybe there's been times in the past where you didn't understand the pick, but they have just built up a reservoir of great drafts to just say, okay, they know what they're doing?
The Ravens. The Ravens always know what they're doing to a T. When everyone thinks Kyle Hamilton is, overrated and falling down the board, they go, "Oh, well, no, he sounds good to us. We'll take him." And next thing you know, he might be the best defensive player in the league, and Tyler Linderbaum was falling down boards, and they just said, "Oh, well, we'll scoop this guy up too. He's a really good center for them now." I feel like the Ravens always have a really good ability to ignore the outside noise and what anyone else might think and just say, we're following our board, we're following our scouts, and this is what we see, this is what we're doing. Another team that I think might not get enough credit, which is weird to say for this team because they're always getting a lot of credit, but from a draft standpoint, the Dallas Cowboys have just, I feel like they, over the last 5 years probably, have just put together good class after good class after good class. I think last year might be a bit of an outlier for them there, but the 4 before that, I think were outstanding classes, and they keep doing it.
Quentin, I grew up with an NFL that was centered around the running back. I saw tons of greats, starting with a guy that just passed away last week that nobody wants to talk about, and I get it. But Tony Dorsett, Franco Harris on through the line. It's completely different. And at a point, the running back position was so devalued because these guys were beat up, and it was just thought, okay, if we can block for anybody, they're somewhat interchangeable. Of course, there are guys that are better than others. And then we seem to hit a spurt, and correct me if I'm wrong, around those Zeke Elliott, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Melvin Gordon drafts about 10 years ago, where, oh, okay, there's some value coming back to the position, but that seems to have been lost again. What are your thoughts about the running back position? Again, who could be the first guy off the board, and then who do you really like that maybe is not drawing a lot of attention?
I think the most likely first guy off the board is probably Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, even though he's coming off the torn ACL. I just think you look at this guy; he's fast. He can get skinny through small areas. He's shifty. I do have some concerns with his between the tackle stuff, but really, when you're projecting these guys, you're projecting upside, and the between the tackles isn't where you find the upside. You know, it's your ability to find that corner, find that edge, and hit the outside run lane. I think Jonathan Brooks can do all that. And I think with where ACL recoveries have really gone the last probably five to 10 years, it's not something that you worry about too much that he's coming off the ACL. So I think Brooks is still going to go probably mid second round. A guy who I have ranked ahead of Brooks. I think Brooks is probably the first off the board, but I like Tennessee's Jalen Wright a little bit better than Brooks just because I think he is so disgustingly explosive. Like, and he's a weird eval though, because you're looking at Josh Heupel's offense where you're like, okay, they're getting some weird defensive fronts because of the way they do stuff. They're not getting stuff that he's going to see at the next level, but you're still seeing him close space before tacklers can hit him and reach him. It's such a high level, and his short area explosion is just extremely impressive, and he has a long speed to take it to the house any given play. If I'm an NFL GM, I'm looking at Jalen Wright going, that's my guy who, he can take it 90 yards to the house any given moment.
We are just about 20 hours away from the NFL draft for 2024. It's coming up on Thursday, of course, from Detroit. We got Quentin Crisco on the line. You can catch his work at Budkiss Stats. All right, before we get to your wheelhouse, I got to ask about wide receiver. People love watching wide receivers play. They're the freak athletes on the field. Marvin Harrison Jr. Has been generally considered to be the guy at that position. But there are some folks out there that like another guy or two to possibly be better. What's your evaluation at that position? And I'm always going to ask you for a wild card outlier guy that you like.
So Marv is wide receiver one. Like from a draft eval standpoint, from a if I were running an NFL team standpoint, Marv's the guy that you bet on 10 times out of 10. But I do like Malik Nabors' tape a little better. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think he's a good route runner. I don't think he's as clean in his releases. I don't really care. I think Malik Nabors has that juice to be just to he does some fun things, man. It's his speed is different. It's like he can cut and not lose a split second of speed, where it's just different when the ball's in his hands. And I think he's going to be a little bit more limited as far as the role he has to play than Marv. Because Marv, I think he can play the X. I think he can go down the slot. He's probably not your Z, but it's hard to find the X anyways. I think at least looking at this draft class, it's a lot harder to find the X. But Malik Nabors, I just think he's that game-changing talent for you who can really be kind of like I was saying with Jalen Wright, just that explosive threat any given moment. Now, Marv is still wide receiver one because he's safer. He's just the safer prospect. You know exactly what you're getting with Marv. And I feel like he might be one of the most sure things to come out of the draft in I don't know how many years, maybe the last 5 years. Like, as far as what you're getting, he is such a clean release package, such a clean route runner, good at the catch point, great athlete, great size. But there's just something constantly pulling at me about Nabors where I'm like, but he's so good. So to me, Marv is still one. I don't think you're going to see many NFL GMs take that chance to say we're going to go with the wild card here, even though we have a sure thing on the board in Marv. But Nabors, I do understand why some people like him more than Marv, and I get it. but I can't actually bring myself to that point because of the safety of Marvin Harrison just being, I think he's going to walk in the league being a really darn good football player. Now, as far as a guy a little further down the board, I mean, so after him, I got Romo Dunze, I got A.D. Mitchell, Brian Thomas, and Lad McConkey in some order. Usually, I think I have A.D., then Lad, then Brian Thomas, which is probably a little different than some other people, but I think I did not realize Lad's injury concerns when I made that board. Now I'd probably put Lad a little lower, but just because he did have some back injuries, and back injuries are always scary. But Brian Thomas Jr. probably belongs ahead of him after you consider the injury, just because the sky's the limit for that kid. He just needs to learn how to play the position some more and learn some release packages, some route running details. But size, speed, weight type stuff, he's outstanding. Now, if we're talking more sleepers, though, a guy like a Malik Washington out of Virginia is really interesting. He graduated from Northwestern, transferred to Virginia last year, walked into Virginia, became their offense, right? He touched the ball more than anyone. He led them in yards, he led them in targets. He walked into a brand new offense, no chemistry with anyone, and became the guy over there. Might be limited to a slot role because of his size, a little smaller, but he's a gamer and he has good athleticism, good quickness. Like he can really be shifty out there. And as long as you can either get him in the slot or scheme him up some free releases, because I do think he's going to struggle with press coverage, but you get him those free releases and in the slot, I think you'll be able to do that as well. I think he can be a really nice football player for someone. And I believe you might fact check me on this if you're listening, but I believe he's a punt returner as well and played multiple special teams roles in his career.
Folks, switching gears here real quick. Keep in mind every Monday through Friday, we're going live during the transfer portal window with a live update every day at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be back here live at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. We got Quentin Crisco here from Budkiss Stats. It's right here on YouTube. Okay, let's go to the offensive line. There's a general manager I heard, this was maybe 10 years ago, say, if you're trying to predict how good NFL teams are, because we know what the deal is with parity in the NFL, teams come and go. There's a couple at the top, maybe a couple at the bottom, but the rest of them are so interchangeable from year to year. They've said everybody looks at starting quarterback, true, but after that, look at line continuity on the offensive side, especially, and the amount of talent. And again, the continuity, the returning starters, starts, all that deal along the offensive line. To me, it is the most important position in football as a unit. The quarterback's the most important guy, but there's no question about that. But as a unit of five, and then also the most difficult to coordinate, obviously, you're trying to put guys in the right place. Oh, this is both these guys, their best positions, right tackle, but we can only have, that whole deal trying to get the chemistry up front. So what's going on along the offensive line? Of course, left tackle has long since been one of those highest paid positions on the field.
Yeah. I mean, so as far as left tackles go, you're looking at Joe Alt. I mean, I love NFL bloodlines when I'm looking at these kids. And it's just like, if I know that you grew up in an NFL locker room, seeing the blood, the sweat, the tears, the pain that goes into becoming a successful NFL player and still want to do it and probably don't have the financial need to go do it because your parents might have gotten paid pretty well. I really like that. I really like the fact they're still sitting there saying, I want this more than anything on earth, and I'm going to work my butt off to get there. Right. And that's what I see in Joe Alt, a guy who didn't even play offensive line until I believe his first year at Notre Dame. He was a tight end in high school. He was a quarterback before that. 6'8". He's gargantuan, long arms. Just you can tell he was a tight end too, because this guy can move. This guy is a different athlete for an offensive tackle. One of the only concerns that you really have with him is maybe he's too tall, like at 6'8", and that sounds kind of funny to say, but it's a real issue sometimes at offensive tackle where the taller you are, the harder it is to settle your weight down and re-leverage it. And it's what we call the anchor, right? So that's one of the only concerns with Joe Alt, that height limits his anchor some and lets him get pushed back into the pocket at times. But from an athleticism standpoint, from a length standpoint, I think he's really good. And it's just so impressive to think this guy hasn't actually played the position for more than 3 years and he's already this good. He's learning it fast. There's a lot to like there. After him for a left tackle spot, you're looking at Olu Fashanu to me. And Fashanu is, I think, he's the best pass protector in the class, best pass blocker in the class. I do have some issues with his run blocking. He just has a really hard time latching. His demeanor seems to be a little hot and cold as a run blocker, but in pass protection, he's so clean. He's jazz music. He's just everything is so smooth, so clean, so nice, and just fits right where it's supposed to be as a pass protector. And then beyond him at left tackle, probably got Troy Fautanu, who I actually think might end up being a guard at the next level, and not for a lack of traits. This guy is about as athletic as they come. He's got 34-inch arms, so plenty of length there. But he was a converted defensive tackle who switched to offensive tackle. And one of the things that is actually kind of adds up with his profile too, when you look at the Washington offense, you see, okay, Michael Penix was a lefty, right? Roger Rosengarten at right tackle was protecting his blind side, and that was on purpose. Rosengarten played left tackle until the Penix got to Washington, and then the Washington staff moved him to right tackle to protect the blind side. Fautanu was always protecting the front side, the where the quarterback can actually have the vision of the defender coming at him, and he's just a bit more raw in just about every aspect than some of these other guys at left tackle, which is why I think he might end up at guard. He has the ideal demeanor. Like he wants to play his heart out. He wants to come after you. He wants to hit you. But as I say that, even I think that sounds like a guard, right? The tackles usually have a bit more finesse to their play style, and he just feels like a guard to me with his play style and with his rawness. He needs so much development at tackle, and I think he could be a really good guard tomorrow. So to me, I think he's a bit more of a guard, but he has all the traits to stay at left tackle. Now, you might be sitting there saying, you skipped a bunch of names. And that's because I don't know if some of these guys can play left tackle or not. JC Latham, love him, love him, love him. He's my number 2 offensive tackle in this class. His anchor is utterly dominant. His strength is so impressive. He's tossing guys like rag dolls at the college level. But he played right tackle at Alabama. He played left tackle in high school from what I've read, but I haven't seen it on tape, so I can't really trust that he can play left tackle unless I see it from a scouting perspective for me. So JC Latham, to me, he's a little bit ahead of Olu Fashanu from a pure just talent standpoint. But if you're talking left tackle, I have a little bit of a worry there. I think he makes all the sense in the world for the Chargers, if I'm being honest. They already got Rashawn Slater at left tackle, but they need a right tackle. I think he fits. Jim Harbaugh saw him up close in the college playoff. He saw him handle Chris Jenkins, who I love Chris Jenkins in this draft, but there were a few plays where JC Latham is tossing a grown man. It's just very, very impressive. And then also at right tackle, you got Talisi Fuaga, another guy who I think might be a guard. And a lot of that, again, comes down to the play style. I think there's some tightness in his hips that will limit his ability to reach and be able to react to guys bending around the corner. In pass pro, his best reps are mostly run blocking, where he's an animal. He's big, he's wide, he's strong, and he's going to come after you. But when it comes to actually protecting his corner off the edge, I think there's some issues there that might be too much to overcome at tackle. So I think he might end up at guard. And Amarius Mims might be the most fun player to watch in this draft. Like I just wax poetic about JC Latham, but Amarius Mims is like JC Latham, but a little more athletic and a lot less proven though, because he's only played, I think, like 8 or 9 games in his college career, but he's built in a lab. He was made for this. Like he is, I think, 6'8", and I have never seen someone carry cleanly as he does. Like if you just saw him on TV alone, you would not guess that this guy is 330 pounds. You'd think he's just like a 6'5", like 250 guy or something. He is so freaking heavy for the way he looks, just how slim, and it's so much lean strength that he has. Because slim's not even the right word. He's jacked up, but he watching his tape was quite the experience, because when I started watching the tape on these guys, it was way back in, I'm a Bears fan, so it was in October, right? I was like, the season's done. I'm going to college prospects. I'm getting ready for the draft. This is all I got anymore. And I found two games that he played in. Amarius Mims played in from last season, where he was in for guys who got injured, and he stunk, to be frank. And I wrote it off. I was like, this guy stinks. I don't need to watch more of him. And then I come back in maybe February, and I get my hands on some of this year's tape. It's a different guy. Oh my gosh, it's a different guy. He is just a dominant force out there when he's healthy. But to Ralph Wolf's point, he's home run or bust. There's no in between, because there is a lot for him to learn. He's a very inexperienced football player. Experience is king in football, and he doesn't have it, which brings more questions, some of the medical questions with him, the injuries that he dealt with. But the talent is so impressive. Just the God-given abilities are all there. They're incredible.
We appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. This is Quentin Crisco. You can catch his work at Butkiss Stats. It's right here on YouTube. Get yourself set for the NFL draft through Saturday in Detroit. Defensive line, we'll brush through the rest of the positions, but just to get your take, and again, maybe a wild card there as well.
Yeah, so on the defensive line, I mean, if you heard me talk about Johnny Newton earlier, I don't think it would be a massive surprise for me to say I initially had Byron Murphy ahead of Johnny Newton. And the only reason I don't anymore is the foot injury, because there are real concerns there. So Byron Murphy's my number one guy. I think he is just so explosive. And I mean, he is a little bit different with his explosion and his bendability. And bend in an interior defensive lineman isn't something you hear a lot about, right? Bend is usually an edge rusher. But what I'm talking about is his ability to contort his body at the waist, rotate it, and still keep power, still be able to deliver power through odd body positions. And that is something that he has in spades, and something that's going to serve him really well in the NFL. A guy who had it last year was Keanu Benton. Keanu Benton was so bendy for an interior defensive lineman. I think Byron Murphy has some really similar traits from that aspect. He's not a nose like Keanu Benton was. I think he's a 3-tech in the league, but that type of ability to be able to maneuver through contact, through power, and keep delivering power is something that you only find a few guys a year who have it, and he has it. And there's a lot for him to learn still. There's room for him to grow, to actually have more of a pass rush plan, to stack moves on top of each other. But from a pure physical profile, he's one of the few guys in this class that you feel like has a chance to be really special, because that physical profile is just different. On the edge, Dallas Turner is probably the top guy. And it's not a production thing. Like, if you're a guy who I did my draft project with, Steve Letizia, he always said about Dallas Turner, if you're drafting him, it's not for what he will be this year. It's for what he will be in 2 years, because he has extremely long arms, a really bendy frame around the edge, which is different than what I was talking about with defensive tackle, right? You're talking about ankle flexion. You're talking about the ability to get your hips low and be able to turn that corner, different than the defensive tackle bend that I was talking about. But he has that ability, which is hard to find. He has a good long arm move already. He doesn't have a ton of other moves yet, but you want to get him somewhere with a strong defensive line coach who can help him continue to improve, continue to grow. I have no question about the guy's work ethic from an outside perspective, because this dude started for Nick Saban as a true freshman at times. He played, I think it was like 500 snaps as a true freshman. Nick Saban doesn't just do that. Nick Saban, you earn those reps big time. And then behind him, you got Jared Verse, who is going to be a power rusher. I think he has a more limited ceiling in the NFL, but his floor is really high. He's gonna walk in the NFL, be a quality number 2 or 1B edge rusher for anybody because that power is going to translate. It's going to play no problem. Latu, probably the best pass rusher in the class, but a big question mark with his neck injuries. And supposedly, I've heard it may have been a neck fusion surgery that he had, which is scary because you start to talk to some medical people who make content out there, and they go, a neck fusion. You look around the league, there's only a handful of guys who have gotten drafted with that, and only one of them got a second contract, and that one was Leighton Vander Esch, who really didn't live up to that second contract. So I think he's going to be pushing down to the 30s, somewhere in the 30s, maybe late 20s, where a team with their championship window wide open right now is going to say, we could use 4 years of this guy right now. But before that, I think it's hard to sell him because of the neck injury. And obviously it's all hearsay. I've never seen the medical records. I don't claim to be a doctor. So it's that type of stuff is always sensitive with that. But that's just what my read is on the situation. And a guy who's a little further down boards, if I want to go just outside the first round, I think Chris Jenkins is going to go earlier than people think. I know I said JC Latham tossed him in the Michigan Bama game, but Chris Jenkins is a dog. Like, again, you get the NFL bloodline aspect. You get a moldable frame. This guy has added 50 pounds since getting to Michigan. He got there as an edge rusher. Now he's a 300-pound, two-gapping 5-tech there. I think he can mold to any role that you want on a defensive line with that frame. He has a ways to go as a pass rusher, but we've seen the flashes. And something that Chris Ballard has famously said, the Colts GM, if you've seen him do it once, he can do it again. There are multiple instances you see of Chris Jenkins doing very impressive things as a pass rusher. It's just not consistent because he's asked to play such a run-stuffing role, such a two-gapping role. You get him in a one-gap defense, I think he's going to eat with a good coach, especially, who can help him develop some of those pass rush moves a little bit better. I mean, he can probably learn a few from his dad, too, the former Pro Bowl defensive tackle. But I'd really like Chris Jenkins in this class. And if we want to go a little further down the board, like into like late day 2, early day 3, a guy like, or actually, let me stick with day 2. A guy I love, Michael Hall Jr. out of Ohio State. Now, when I first watched Michael Hall, I said, okay, this is a 280-pound interior pass rusher, right? He's going to be able to play third downs in the NFL. That's about it because you can't trust him against the run. But he's a fun pass rusher. Then his pro day comes. He didn't do any testing at the combine. He waited till his pro day. He weighed in at the combine at I want to say it was 292 or something. So he beefed up for it. It was like, okay, you can put on water weight. Yeah, that's great. You didn't test. Get to his pro day. He's up to 298 or 299. And he does all his testing and still blows it out of the water. That's different. That's something that gets me excited because I'm sitting here now saying this guy was stacking pass rush moves, move after move, same rep at Ohio State, really impressively. He grew like crazy from last year to this year from his pass rush development standpoint, his plan, his ability to execute those moves. And now you're telling me this guy's 300 pounds and still testing like that? I'm excited now. I think this guy can really be something in the league as long as he can translate that additional mass into real power on the field.
All right. Once again, it's Quentin Crisco. You can catch him on Butkus Stats. It's right here on YouTube, and follow Quentin over there if you want to catch up on any other player profiles. Of course, we could only do so much with those positions. You got linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties as well in terms of what we were not able to hit on. Quentin, we appreciate you stopping by. We know that this is, in a sense, what you live for. So it's your time of year starting on Thursday night.
Yes, sir. I'm excited for it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Quentin. Good to see you. Take care.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Great to have Quentin Crisco on to talk NFL draft. I got to say, we have not necessarily secured our draft plans here at the Voice of College Football. In the past, we've done post NFL draft, at least the first 2 nights. Don't know if we'll do that. Don't know if that's going to pay off. Don't know if that's something that you guys want to see. Maybe I'll take a poll and see if we get enough responses um, to do a draft, post-draft show, again, as we have done in the past. So lightly attended here tonight. Don't know if people are going to show up for a post-draft show. So I'll have to think that one over. And of course, once again, we will take our cues from you. Ralph is asking, post draft show. Well, we could get I don't know, 500 people in here to watch a show. I would love to do one, but it doesn't make much sense otherwise. So we have done them in the past. I can't even tell you how they've done. It's not something I really taken note of. Before we really got deep into college football, well, we were deep into college football, but in regards to having not many subs at the time, the NFL draft content that we put out, let's say 10 years ago or more, 10 years ago or more, yes, was some of the most watched here on the national channel. So, all right, all right, all right. Yes. So we've got a couple votes, but we need a couple hundred would be good. So we do appreciate you guys, our core here at the Voice of College Football, but otherwise it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to send a poll out and we'll see what kind of response we get for a post draft show. I would love to do it. I love the NFL draft. I am not in a position to have the time to keep up with all the preparation for the NFL draft like Quentin was displaying with his knowledge of who could possibly go where and all of that. But in terms of just watching a TV show and having investment in the NFL, loving the NFL as I have for 45 years, and then on top of that, loving college football as well. Just you put those two worlds together and make it a nice TV show. I love it. Love the NFL draft all the way through the 7th round. I love the NFL draft. So would love to be here after the draft on Thursday night if it makes sense. Appreciate you being here. You will see me next time at 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning for, of course, Wake Up College Football. So that's our new show that we started on April 15th. And we get together with all of you. That's every Monday through Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Wake Up College Football. It's a fun mix of the college football headlines of the day with also some breakfast talk. You get to see me make breakfast, as I did a few days ago with the bacon and eggs. And we also whipped up a smoothie, as was presented to me by one of our viewers who wanted to see a vegan breakfast. So we presented that. And again, for me to get out of bed to do something, I must be committed to it. So 8 a.m. Eastern Time, every Monday through Thursday. Join us in just a few hours, and we will see you then, bright and early.